Hi, everyone, and welcome to Choral Arts. I'm April, and this is our interview series, Music by Women on a Mission. Like many of you, our staff are all working from home, and sometimes that presents us with a few challenges. But despite these challenges, we think it's really important to bring you these interviews from the female composers whose music was to be featured on our March concert. And our conversation with Ysaÿe Barnwell brought us so much wonderful joy that we hope it brings a little light to your day. Enjoy.
Well, Barnwell, hello, and how great to talk to you. All I see right now is your hand. There you are. Okay, I knew you were back there somewhere. Let me start by asking you. I know that you were just in Senegal recently. What was that trip about, and what were you doing over there?
It was really a trip about fun and just going to the country to see and observe and meet new people. One of the singers in Sweet Honey in the Rock lived in Senegal for a number of years before she came back and came into the group. And there was something about her that I just really was attracted to in terms of her movements, the way she used her voice, the connection that she had to Africa and to Senegal particularly, which is very different from Kenya or Nigeria. And so I always wanted to go there. I had an opportunity to go with a friend who leads tours to different countries, and I've traveled with her before. And so I was there for a good week. And I had a great time. I heard music. I went to communities where there were activities and things going on, and there was always music in the environment. And so I just really got a good taste, I think, musically, in terms of food, in terms of dance, in terms of communities. I had a great time.
That sounds wonderful. I mean, I know that, it's like you say, it's very different than Kenya or maybe other parts of Africa. When I was in my 20s, I spent about 9 months in Kenya, in Western Kenya. And I remember that had a huge influence on me about what music really was, because I was in a very small community in a rural part of Kenya, and they just gathered and sang every week just as a community. And I suddenly saw music in a whole different light. I was a trumpet player, and I thought about concerts and, being on the stage and doing all that. And then I saw music in this very basic way, and it just turned on a light bulb for me about what music's about. And I know that you now, especially after your time with Sweet Honey, which we'll talk about, but in these last 7 or 8 years, you've been really focused on community building through singing. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that and how that became an emphasis of yours.
Actually, it came out of my experiences in Sweet Honey. Because it was there that the group decided that it wanted to share her music with people in various communities in a different way than being on stage. It's like, this is how we put a song together. And finally, here's the whole room singing the song instead of just 5 women. And that has just always stuck with me, because there are so many people who want to sing and are terrified at the thought of it. And they feel like if they join a group, they're going to be called out and somebody's going to say, you sang the wrong notes, and that doesn't, everybody's scared of singing the wrong note. So nobody's going to point to anybody else. They're just going to do their best. And when you realize that it's just a coming together of people who like to spend time doing something that makes them feel good, it changes the whole environment. We're not a choir. We're just like getting together to share our voices. And so I've been doing it now for a long time. But it started with Sweet Honey, and I'm glad that I was able to keep it going. I think, although I'm not sure, that Sweet Honey may still have community sings, but I would need to check on that. So I find that it becomes a vehicle for sharing now in a lot of opportunities. You know, I go to different communities and somebody, I know a song about the so-and-so. And for the first time for them, they will be teaching a song. And that's really exciting as well, because it doesn't stop with me. It goes on to all of these other people. So that makes me happy.
Yeah, not just you. I mean, I think it sounds actually sort of powerful. Do you get a lot of feedback about those things?
Well, I do. And in fact, it's really interesting because there was a student 20 years ago, maybe, when I was doing this at Levine early on. His name is Micah Hendler. I don't know if you know him, but he majored in music. He has a choir in Israel, and they come to the United States every now and then. And he's actually here now and is working with different people, and asked me if I would lay a track to a song that he had recorded. So after I finish with this interview, I think I'll be doing that. And so, you know, it's hard to know what people are doing and where in the world this is going on, because they got an experience that they needed to continue. So.
Well, that's wonderful. I think that's very cool that this grew out of Sweet Honey, because, you know, a lot of us know you first through your experience with Sweet Honey. And Sweet Honey in the Rock has been, you know, such an iconic now, a part of not just this community in Washington, but really everywhere. I was in Boston when I first heard of you guys, and it just, you know, rocked my world the first time I heard you. So how did that association come about? You were there for a number of years, right? From maybe 79 or so through, if I could say.
Yeah, it was a long time. Well, they exist because Bernice Johnson Regan would have sings, and actually Levine had a lot to do with that in terms of people coming together and singing. But Bernice Johnson Regan, I think, was the inspiration for me. I heard her voice and I thought, oh my goodness, now I'm not embarrassed that I sing, you know, low and loud and and I don't want to read the notes. I want to just sing. And, you know, I'm a trained musician. I studied violin all my life and sang in choirs and played in orchestras. But to just get together and to sing was, like, for some reason, this whole new experience that I really loved. And so out of her experience of leading groups, she actually was a member of the SNCC Freedom Singers. So she had that small ensemble experience, but she also had the church experience from Albany, Georgia. And she brought all of that to bear, and I was just soaking it up. So I really have to give the credit to Bernice for starting, you know, all of this. And she was the one, after I got into Sweet Honey, who said, you know, well, Sweet Honey should do a workshop for Levine, you know, and then we started rehearsing there. So that became a regular kind of thing. And it just grew. It just grew.
And how did you first meet her? You just heard her singing someplace, or how did you guys connect first time?
I'm trying to remember. I don't actually remember how we first met, but I did know that she had been part of the SNCC Freedom Singers, and that was an amazingly powerful ensemble. But I'm not sure how we actually connected. It'll come back at some point. I'll remember.
You mentioned you were a violinist, and you know, your singing voice is so low. Some people who are instrumentalists and then sing, you know, they sort of take on the role of the instrument they used to play in a way, you know, the high melody if you're violinist, but you went the other way. Your voice, provides this depth provided this depth to Sweet Honey when you sang with them. And so did you always kind of sing the lowest part? I mean, did you gravitate there from the first time you started singing?
Wow, I don't really know, because I actually have a high range too, or had one. I had about 3.5 octaves that were easy to get to. And I'm trying to, there was a man named S. Carroll Buchanan in Jamaica, Queens. While I was in junior high school, he had put together an ensemble of students, and all we sang were Negro spirituals. That was my introduction, because my father taught violin and piano. I played violin. Well, you can't live in a house with a teacher and not do what the teacher does or tells you to do. I played in All City High School Orchestra. On Saturday mornings we rehearsed, and then we had a lot of guest conductors. And in the springtime, we had our big concert at Carnegie Hall. So I was really involved in the instrumental thing. But when Dr. Buchanan, sort of let the community know that he had this choir of young people, I ran to join that. And all we sang were spirituals. And that was my introduction. And I'm so grateful for it, because it didn't come, I don't know where I would have learned what I learned. Right now, I can sing you probably all of the parts of all of the spirituals that we learned, because that's how my brain functions. And it came out of that. And then I joined All City High School Orchestra in New York, and we had concerts at Carnegie Hall. And there was this other ensemble, Mr. Buchanan's ensemble, in Queens, that would put on performances. And so it's the world I grew up in. So I think I still know in my head probably all of the arrangements of the spirituals that we sang. And I find them popping up for me. And, I'm like, wow, where'd that come from? But it came from that earlier experience.
When you were with Sweet Honey, you wrote a number of songs that they recorded, and a lot of them are really memorable ones. And I'm wondering, did you start writing music there with them, or were you writing music all along, when you were a child?
I knew I could write, and I always sang along with everything. My friends used to get so disgusted with me, because they said, "Why don't you ever sing the melody? You never sing the melody. What's that you're singing?" And I was like, "Why? I hear the melody. I know what that sounds like. I need to sing the rest of the stuff." So when I joined Sweet Honey, it was an inspiration not only to arrange things, but actually to write things, to compose things. And so there was a playwright that I knew, and he asked me if I would write some music for a play that he wrote. And so I did. And out of that came the experience of composing. And that was really kind of what started me. I need to try to figure out, I need to remember his name, and David, what's his name? I have to remember his last name and figure out what he's doing, because he really was instrumental, even though he may not know it, of my beginning to compose things on a serious level.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your father was a music teacher and a violinist, I think, is that right? And your mom was a nurse, is that right?
Right, a registered nurse.
Yeah. So so you studied when you went into formal study at university, you went the medical way, right? You went into speech pathology, and you are
did.
Dr. Barnwell. You are
I
Dr. Barnwell.
am.
You're not. You have a doctorate in that field.
I have a
Yeah.
doctorate in that field, and I have a postdoc in public health. But you know what?
So,
It's really interesting because when I grew up, I was aware of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was an amazing woman who was deaf and blind, but had learned how to communicate using sign language in the palm of her hand. People would speak to her through her hands. And that, I was like 12 years old, I think, when I became aware of her and how she functioned through a play that was on Broadway called The Miracle Worker. And that play talked about her teacher, Annie Sullivan. And I think that's her name. And it just changed everything for me. It's like, if you can't hear, there's still a way to communicate the music that's inside of you. And that's where that started for me. You know, it's like, okay, I'm playing the violin and I'm going to rehearsals and I'm doing all of this. But what about people who can't hear this? How do you communicate the beauty? How do you get them to understand? And then I began to understand that there are things like vibrations that you can feel. And that I think if you are sensory deprived in one area, some things get heightened for you. So that if you can feel rhythm in the kitchen table, you know, if you can feel the pulse of the bass drum or whatever, you know, through the floor, if it's loud enough and drives everybody else crazy, you're having a good time. And that just, I had to find like some way to make peace with that and to figure out ways to share it with other people. That is why Sweet Honey in the Rock has had a sign language interpreter. And when I was part of the group and we were singing and the interpreter was interpreting, I would see the deaf folk and the hard of hearing folk, you know, up front, and they'd be signing too. And it just would make me want to cry because somehow the thing that I enjoyed the most was being conveyed to people who normally, quote unquote, would not have that experience. So that for me, it started with Helen Keller, you know, can't see, can't hear, but can still appreciate music. And I thought that was just the most incredible thing that I could process in my little brain.
When you were talking about vibrations, I was thinking, do you know of this? I think she's Scottish. She plays the marimba and she's deaf. Evelyn Glennie is her name.
Yes. We have met.
Oh, you have met?
We have met very briefly, but we have met, and it was wonderful.
I understand she really feels the music through the floor. That's at least what I've heard her describe. Yeah, just right through her feet, and that's quite amazing.
It is amazing. It really is amazing.
So I wanted to talk to you or ask you a little bit about the pieces, or at least two of the pieces we were thinking about singing back in March. And one of them is We Are, which has this wonderful refrain, for each child that's born, the morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. And I just wonder, you know, sort of where that came from, you know, and you're just right out of your mind, or what were you thinking when you wrote those words?
You know, it's hard to know where these things come from. It was quite some time ago, and I was doing some work with a choreographer that I was writing some music for some of his productions. And I think it was part of one of those. I don't remember accurately these days, But I know it came during that period, and I was in Sweet Honey. And so there were always ways that I could try things out. And I think We Are was one of those. And I really kind of liked how things come to you and you say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. For each child that's born, there's a star and there's a melody and there's a way of celebrating that child that has something to do with forces that are bigger than we are. So it sort of came out of that thinking that there are bigger things that celebrate who we are. And sometimes we don't know that we've been celebrated. And I think if you never have an entree into thinking that there's something bigger than you that celebrates the fact that you exist, it diminishes you in terms of how you support yourself and celebrate yourself and how you allow yourself to connect with the larger world. And so I think inside of that song is that feeling, to just say to people, wake up, because there's something that celebrates you and who you are and what you're doing, no matter how minimalist you feel. There's something there for you. So,
when I first asked you that question, you sort of like, where did that come from? And I'm wondering, some very creative people describe the act of creating as not as, building something in your brain, but kind of tapping into something that's already out there and just kind of channeling it. I wonder if when you write some of this music, it feels that way to you, like it's out there and you're just kind of tapping into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can't accept credit for it. Because, I do feel like the energies and the forces are much bigger. And I think, someone who says to me, oh, you should write a piece about so-and-so, or can you write it? Blah, 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 blah. And I say, okay. And then I have to just leave it alone, because I realize it's not a mechanical thing for me. I don't care about the 4 or 5 chord progression. I don't care about any of that, although I've studied it. I don't know, where it exists in the things that I write. It's just like something happens. And I can't tell you sometimes whether the words come first or the music comes first. Sometimes it all comes at the same time. And I can't tell you any more about it.
It's a mystery.
It is a mystery. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I don't pull on that energy. I don't usually pull on that energy unless someone asks me to write something. That is, I don't just sit down and start writing just for the fun of it. It's like somebody says, oh, can we commission you, or can you do so and so and so and so? And it's like, oh, okay. Then something starts to happen inside of me. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure that I would know that I had that ability if I hadn't been asked to do like the first piece, whatever that was. So I'm grateful. And I have some big things. I have some big pieces, like full musical kind of, things with movements and instruments and, full orchestra and full choir and soloists and stuff.
You have a cantata. I know you have written a cantata not that long ago. Is that right?
Yeah. Fortune's Bones is one of the bigger pieces that I've written, and a couple of others. Yeah.
Wanted to circle back to another song you wrote for or Sweet Honey, and that is Wanting Memories. And unless I'm mistaken, I think you wrote that about your father. Is that right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it certainly relates to him, but I didn't write it for him. It's really interesting because I think in the last like 20 years, I've had what I consider a really bad memory. And so, writing that song was like this, like, I actually do want these memories to come back to me. I really do. I don't want to forget them. I don't want it to like just leave me. Because memories are so important, and the things that you remember and when you remember them, I think is very important, because things are, it's like, it's hard to know when something is going to trigger a memory that seems totally unrelated to what's going on. And yet there it is. And so that was, it was really, I mean, that song for me is pretty deep, in terms of a deep personal longing to know what happened, what was said, why did this happen, etc. That I feel like I don't easily have access to. So there you go. Therapy.
Yeah.
Just thinking about the fact that your mom was a nurse and that you grew up in the New York area. These days, these past 2 weeks have been so disastrous for the whole country. But particularly, it's been heartbreaking to see in New York the hospitals and the caretakers, nurses and doctors be so overwhelmed by taking care of so many patients for COVID-19. I'm wondering if you have been thinking about that at all, and what your impressions are, and especially in light of having grown up with a healthcare worker right in your house.
I have been thinking about it a lot, and it really, it brings me to tears sometimes. And I have no idea what I can do to be helpful. And, every now and then I think, oh, something will come to me, and then maybe I can put it online or whatever. I don't know. But really, it's very painful. It's very painful. I grew up in Queens, in Elmhurst, and I know that area very well. But I also know Pittsburgh, and I also know Rochester, New York, because I've spent time in all of those places. And it's not that all of them have been hitting the news, but New York is pretty devastated. And I think about that. I do think about that.
I mean, I know you were there a long time ago. Do you still have any connections there with people?
I have some friends there, but we're not, we don't connect very often. And I think, for about 10 years after my parents died, I rented out the house that I had grown up in. And when I sold that house, I was like, yikes, I'm cutting this cord for real. But I still see that house so clearly. I see the driveway, I see the backyard. I see the little fountain we had in the backyard. My father was an inventor, and the basement was his territory. He was an inventor, and he was a musician. He was a classically trained violinist. He taught me violin, and he had students. That teaching occurred in the living room, where the piano was, the grand piano that's now in my living room. But his, the place where he piddled was in the basement. That's where he invented things. And he actually had 3 patents for things that he invented, which, I think that's where I get I have certain kinds of inquiry going on. How's that work? Because of my father. And it's an interesting thing to put together a mechanical feel with a musical feel, and to not have the music feel mechanical, but to understand that there are mechanics that make music work. And I've juggled that in my life, all through my life. If you can tighten this screw, this thing will work better, or loosen the screw, this thing will work better. So if you can sharpen that note just a little bit, it's going to sound much better. It's so funny how pieces come together that you would not expect. But those two concepts lived inside of my father, and he passed both of them on to me. And so, my friends know that I have like this mechanical thing. Oh, I can fix that. Okay. Musical thing. Oh, I can fix that. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I've never talked about this before. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of mechanical and music and your music is, much of it, at least what you wrote for Sweet Honey, has this rhythmic, interlocking sense. There's interlocking parts, often like gears almost in a lot of that music. And I wonder if that's related to this mechanical sense you have. You love rhythm. I could tell. It's just such a basic part of the way you write.
When I was 12, I studied African drumming with a man named Olatunji. I don't know if you've ever heard his recordings or anything like that, but he was the first person to bring West African drumming to the United States, where it became commercial. You could hear it on the radio. And so I think that has also a lot to do with it, that there's a foundation to everything. And how do you express that foundation musically? So, wow, this is a great conversation. You're reminding me of so many things. Thank you.
Well, you were wanting memories, and so here we are. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I'm getting them. Thank you.
Well, Ysaÿe, I have to say, you and I met, when did we meet? About 7 or 8 years ago, when we honored you with Choral Arts Humanitarian.
Yeah.
And, it's just been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit through that time, but especially today. To hear all that you have to say. Like all our composers, I think if I'm finding a common thread of talking to all of you, it's that really deep curiosity, and that you don't want to follow up on. And if there's a spark to all of you that I've talked to so far, that's just a common thread. And it's just there in you. It's so beautiful to see. It's so beautiful to talk to you. And I just wanted to thank you for giving your time today to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
April, I didn't give you a chance to chime in at all. Did you have any questions for Ysaÿe before we close?
Really, just how are you doing now that you can't go anywhere and you're staying at home? And what are you doing to keep yourself busy?
Oh, I'm doing interviews. I'm trying to. I have a pile now of books I've wanted to read. Have I started reading them? No. I look at my dining room table and I want to clean it off. Do I clean it off? No. I'm just in a fog. I think I'm just in a fog. And I feel like I'll get out of it eventually. And then my dining room table will mysteriously be organized and cleared. And, you know, but what I realize is this is my environment. This is what I sit in the middle of when I am creating. Maybe that's a sign that I should be creating. I just haven't given myself permission yet. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
We'll see.
Well,
I enjoyed this
again.
conversation very much.
I did too. Very much. Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, take care.
All righty.
Love to you.
Back at you.